Today we're going to be looking at ableism and autism in mainstream society using author Emerson as an example. Author Emerson says, "The Road of Silence is about a non-deaf character. Please do not drag what I'm doing when you don't know the synopsis." I'm going to just show you guys some sources. We're going to look at some things, and then I'm going to address this comment. So this originally started with a hearing person telling me that he wrote a deaf character. Right now, we're going to just acknowledge that intention and impact are two different things. So we are not considering the author's intent here. We are just looking at the impact of the words that are available to me. This screenshot is from allisquietinthecosmos.com, and it talks about an abandoned prince in a road of silence with a dark past and a curse in a road of violence and a disillusioned soldier. The trailer refers to the prince as having a horrific curse in a road of silence. So, regardless of what the author intended, I'm going to talk now about how some of this ideology ties into discrimination against deaf people. So according to this press release put out by Newsworthy AI, All Is Quiet in the Cosmos is set in a road of both violence and silence. We'll discuss how this is relevant to deaf people in a minute. Next, we're going to look at some sources regarding deaf issues, and then I'm going to discuss how this all connects. According to Georgetown University's Berkley Center, some Christians perceive deafness as a consequence of a fallen world that God will eventually restore. And in the Bible, Jesus heals a deaf man, and the healing of disabilities was taken as a sign of Jesus' ministry. This is deeply tied into a history of deafness being perceived as a curse. Mission Network News published a story about a gentleman named Sam who shared his story about his own deafness being perceived as a curse in his community and what he did in order to advocate for deafness in his community. He was the only kid in his village, and his parents attempted to have the curse removed through multiple exorcisms. And here we can see an example of what I would consider internalized ableism. I didn't get the screenshot on mobile, but on the website for hearinglossjournal.com, it says news, views, and the search for a cure, which is an extremely ableist approach to deafness, trying to cure it, and comes from a history of eugenics and genocide against us. But I wanted to show this from that source because, well, first of all, my last name is Carney, and this is about the Carney curse. It's about genetic deafness and about it being called a curse. In this world of silence and violence, one of those soldiers was considered disillusioned. A definition I found from Merriam Webster shows that you see something as less valuable if you call it disillusioned. In the National Institute of Health Medline magazine, they discuss how they, after someone convinced them to, stopped calling disabled people a burden, eventually. Also, Education Sciences discusses how deaf new Americans or immigrants receive less accommodations than other deaf people or access in society than other immigrants. And now I'm going to look at some screenshots of the conversation we've had at the point that I've recorded this video. And we are going to also discuss your comment during that and after. I screenshot the comments, but they do appear out of order, so I'm just going to recap from my perspective. So on a Deaf Friends video, this other hearing person, Emerson, commented that, hey, they made it to the late deaf side of TikTok. And at first I was like, oh, you're late deaf, you're late to the party, like, okay, cool. Then they clarified to me that they were not deaf, but they wrote a deaf character and they knew some deaf people. I explained to them that I thought it was extremely offensive for a hearing person to try and write from the deaf perspective, unless they were simply saying, oh, this was a deaf person, but you didn't write from the deaf perspective. I explained to them because they cannot understand what it's like to be deaf, if you are not deaf, then anything you write is only your impression of deafness, and it doesn't actually represent what it means to be deaf. And if you're not deaf and you're misrepresenting deafness, that is discrimination. It is also exploitation of us for your in order to profit, as a device. And it also makes it harder for deaf people to correct hearing people, because hearing people are able to get their message out more than deaf people can. And it makes us have to do a lot more work to correct those misrepresentations. So it turns out everything I've shown you already, that wasn't actually supposed to even be about a deaf person. That was another book. So this book about hearing people happens to have some concepts in there that tie into ableism. And this person said they wrote another book with a deaf character. What really makes me feel like I need to make a video about this to call it out was their comment to me telling me, that they discussed this with the deaf community and it was okay for them to write about a deaf character. And that kind of goes back to the video I did before on tokenization. But I think there's so many reasons it's extremely problematic for any hearing person to tell a deaf person, well, these other deaf people said I could discriminate against you, so it's fine. And something else that I think bothers me here, and I think is a trigger for me, is they have this method, I feel like, with their vernacular of gaslighting you using civility. And that's something that is a big issue for me, because I hate when people try to play off niceness when they're really, really being intentional with their niceness in terms of using it against you. Obviously, I can't speak for all deaf people, but I know I am not the only deaf person that feels this way. And it really, really bothers me whenever a hearing person's like, well, I spoke to the deaf community already. Like, no. I highly doubt that a hearing person, very small amount of hearing people statistically have the deaf connections to have more deaf connections to deaf people than another deaf person. You know what I'm saying? Deaf people, we are the deaf community, and you're rejecting us now. So now let's bring it back to All Is Quiet in the Cosmos, which advertises a road of silence and violence in which someone is cursed. I've already discussed with you, how deaf people have experienced oppression, violence, and being perceived as a curse. Now let's talk about these ideas of all is quiet in the cosmos and the road of silence. Who experiences a road of silence? Deaf people. You know what I mean? So, you're saying I made an imaginary world in which I don't exist, or in which my identity doesn't matter, so it's fine? I don't understand your comment. You're saying the road of silence is about a non-deaf character. Well, that's funny, because only deaf people actually experience a road of silence. So what is this? Because that feels like a deaf erasure now. So, yes, I'm mad at you for writing a character with a deaf person in whatever book that is. And I'm also mad at you for writing a book where you say there isn't even any deaf people in it, but it's about a life only deaf people experience that you decided to create. I'm gonna write a book. It's gonna be called The Road of Feminism, and there will be no woman in this book. Also, what is this non-deaf? That's hearing. That's hearing. Non-deaf isn't it? Are you kidding me? Oh shit, I forgot I had to show you the rest of the comments. Discussing or being upset about discrimination isn't dragging you. And I believe your usage of drag here is AAVE, and I would like you to not be racist as well. You don't seem to care about discrimination against deaf people, so I don't think you'll care about the racism either, but I'm also going to try and hope you maybe give a little bit of a fuck about that. The term drag, as you use it, is AAVE, and it is racist for white people to speak in AAVE.